Dr. Nick, we're back again for part 2 of our bone broth chats. So Nick, we had an amazing chat last time. Thank you so much for all your insightful information. We've had amazing feedback and some really great comments, about people who've never used bone broth before and now looking to use it for their dogs and their cats. So yeah, I'm really chuffed with the response so far, and I do, it just goes to show that this information is invaluable to people, that they need to hear this stuff, because we've been lied to so much, about what's good for us and what isn't good for us, and we're taking it. We're taking it back, and I think that's really important. We're taking back our natural health, we're taking back our natural foods, and and showing people, this is one thing that we're very passionate about at Boil and Broth is sustainability. Showing people that you can reuse your waste, that there are so many, as a race, a human race, we've used our the meats and the animals. We've used all of the animal, every part of the animal, the fat, the organs, and for our pets, it's just as vital that they go back to a natural living. So this week, Dr. Nick, we are going to be covering how to use bone broth. So let's get into that, because you've got dogs, right, and cats. Have you got cats as well?
Yeah, 3 dogs, 3 cats, 3 chickens, 5 peacocks, and 2 children.
Yeah, they come part of the clan. Love it. So Dr. Nick, please do share with us, because as a lover of broth as much as I am too, how do you use it in your family? How are you giving it to your dogs at the moment?
Okay, so for my dogs, who are all pretty healthy, but actually, quite interestingly, about 3 weeks ago, Jet, he got in a tangle. He's only a young guy, and he went up, toe to toe with one of the more mature dogs in the village, and they had a shouting match at each other. And I think, and it was Jet's fault. He got a tooth caught here. It wasn't a bite. Okay, it was literally a tear, and so he had a rip in his skin, and you can see the muscle underneath this size on his shoulder. So it was on his shoulder, therefore we couldn't stitch it, because every time he took a step, he would not be able to, it would burst the stitches. Okay, or when he got down, it just keep on opening. So we didn't stitch it. We deliberately didn't stitch it. We cleaned it up and all that stuff. And you can't bandage, unless you put a half dog bandage on, the size of a t-shirt. You can't realistically do that. And so we had to leave it open. It was cleaned and what have you, but we had to leave it open for what they call secondary intention. If a surgeon closes you up after your appendicitis or whatever it might be, that's called primary intention. But if you leave the wound to heal on its own devices, that's called secondary intention. Okay, this is how we describe it. And so we've left him to secondary intention. He's getting bone broth, he's getting raw food, and he has not had one hint of infection. No smell, no pus, no nothing. Okay, and he's out there, he's rolling in the soil, he's going in water, all sorts. So his ability to heal is just absolutely spectacular. Okay, so it was this size when it started, and it's now down to about the size of a penny. Okay, a UK penny. All right, and it's just spectacular. It's beautiful to see. Okay, so that's just kind of a practical. It's which comes down to just feeding really well. We give them bone broth as treats during the summer. We'll use bone broth to promote hydration, and what you can do is you can use bone broth as part of the transition period. What some people will do, especially if they're very fearful that. I mean, mine went on to raw the day they arrived here, so we didn't really do a transition. But bone broth was a part of that, funnily enough, not deliberately. It's just bone broth is one of those things. So what I was saying is that so what some people will do is before they transition from ultra processed kibble onto raw, they will have a fast day, fasting as in no food day, to allow the gut to empty, to allow the gut to rest before they bring in the new food. That's one way. There's lots of ways of transitioning, and I'd love to talk about transitioning in later episodes.
We will, definitely.
But what they'll do is they'll use bone broth as part of that fast period, because it contains glutamine, which is an energy source, the energy source for your enterocytes. Now, interestingly, forgive me if I'm boring you here, but you are separated from the bugs and the gloop in your gut by one layer of cells. Okay, just one layer. That's between you and not seeing the sun set today. That's it. Okay, and they love glutamine. Guess what's really, really high in glutamine? Okay, glutamine is the kind of the super duper amino acid within bone broth, which feeds those enterocytes. So that's why it works so well. Okay, because you're healing, you're preparing. They talk about healing and sealing the gut with bone broth. Okay, so that's a really, really important thing. So yeah, so for transitions, I hope you're going to ask me how I use it in veterinary practice, because
yes.
I can give you some more.
I really need to ask that question, Nick. But before you move on to telling us about that, I just wanted to confirm that, you know, I truly believe that that's real, because in my own personal experience with bone broth, you know, I had leaky gut syndrome. I had, that was part of my candida overgrowth that I had, and I had it for 3 years, and you know, and it was so invasive, and it was really hard to get rid of, you know, this overgrowth of fungi. And it was, you know, caused from antibiotics, too many during pregnancy. You know, pregnancy disrupts the gut bacteria as well. And plus that I was eating like, you know, 2 to 3 Belgian buns a day, because I was like, oh, I'm eating for 2, it's okay. But anyway, so this did create a problem for me. And but as soon as I introduced broth and a natural diet and kefir, you know, I love my kefir, you know, into my diet, things totally started to change. And I always had this motto that it was the healing and the sealing of the bone broth, you know, the reducing of the inflammation, this, you know, this healing of the gut lining. And so it's really, really amazing that you said that too. And I believe it's so vital for our pets, because so many dogs do have leaky gut syndrome and it's going undiagnosed. And because it isn't a recognized condition, you know, that people are just battling with it. But anyway, Nick, please do share with us about how, as a vet, you know, how would you recommend dogs to have broth, particularly if they haven't had it before? And Sure.
Just another story about dogs in summer. What you can do is when you make your bone broth, you can put it into ice cube trays, put it in the freezer, and then you've got a super healthy treat for the summer. Absolutely brilliant. Just apropos of nothing, but I just wanted to get that in, because
I'll pick up on that in a minute, actually, Nick, because I've got some questions. I've got a question around that too. So we'll pick up on that.
So in clinical practice, we will use it. I love bone broth because it's one of those things that you can call on in practically every situation. So we can use it pre-op, if your dog's going in for an operation, just to build them up and help to feed the gut, feed the microbiome as well. So we can use it pre-op. We can use it in the day or two as post-op. Okay, if they're not feeling very hungry, then you can just make a kind of an easy to digest slightly sloppy, pro-hydration meal. So in that post-op scenario, and then longer term after an operation, because an operation by definition, you're either going through soft tissue or you're going through bony material, and that needs to heal. And bone broth is just pouring goodness into the body to allow that healing process to take place. So operations, brilliant idea. Also, bitches, if they get pregnant, great. You know, they need all the nutrients they can. It's really important to provide the basics for growth. Yeah, because if you think of it, human babies, what they do in 9 months, okay, puppies do in 9 weeks. Okay, yeah. So which is remarkable. So that therefore in that kind of scenario, and also when they're growing, you know, they get to maturity in between 6 months and 15 months. Yeah, it takes us 12 to 22 years, and even then men are not psychologically or neurologically mature until post 25. Okay, so dogs do it very quickly, and therefore if we can put in those building blocks, I think that's really, really important. Okay, so yeah, so that'd be just kind of just on the practical. If you just try, you know, giving up a treat, or you're just trying to coax them, they've gone off their food, or if they get diarrhea, making sure that you're healing the gut, and you are encouraging them to drink. Okay, so if in doubt, I love these things. If in doubt, bone broth is just a brilliant thing to always turn to. If you've got a dog who is either middle-aged or older age, or even a young dog with joint issues, bone broth is absolutely. There's some great science. There's a 2017 study in the Nutrition Journal by Clark et al, and they found that collagen reduces. They actually measured that it reduces joint pain in people. There's loads of studies like that. Okay, there is science. People be watching this and thinking, oh, he's just a fan of bone broth, and yes, he would say that, and what have you. I'm not. There is great science out there, and it's very easy these days with Google and what have you. It's very easy to find those things. So if you've got a dog with joint issues, I think that bone broth should be something that you rely on heavily. Okay, because if you've got arthritis, or if you've got any condition whatsoever, you need to treat it. Okay, and if you can delay the use of pharmaceuticals as much as you possibly can, then that's really what I do. Okay, I try and prevent disease appearing in the first place, but you know, things like arthritis inevitably will come along, and then if we can promote health, reduce inflammation with that dog, then you've got a reduced dependence on pharmaceuticals. I'm not anti-pharmaceutical. I think they're fantastic. You know, if I go outside and get hit by a bus, I want lots of pharmaceuticals. All right, but while I'm in hospital, I want a lot of bone broth, okay, to help with that healing process. Okay, so we're getting the best of both worlds. You know, we're quite clever. Modern medicine thinks it's a lot more clever than it actually is, but if we can get the best of both worlds there, Rachel, I think that's a really important thing. So
I love it.
In a nutshell, if there's the slightest issue with joint health, now you're talking about joint health, people think, oh, my dog's lame. Yes, great, I'll do that. But what about the neck? Is there any neck pain? Okay, in my profession, underuses chiropractors and osteopaths. So I think everybody should take their dog from forever, actually, but from at least middle age onwards, to see a very good chiropractor or osteopath. And if there's the slightest imperfection, which there inevitably will be, then I think we should do that. Yeah, you may not see a lameness, but you may have lumbar lumbosacral disease. You may have sore hips, which you can't see, but it's actually happening there. So I think that, you know, relying on bone broth is just such an important thing to do. Okay, so very simply speaking, if there's the slightest hint or suspicion that the dog needs support with their joints, and remember there's joints from the tip of your nose to the tip of your tail, if there's the slightest suspicion, then bone broth I think is brilliant. If there's the slightest suspicion of gut problems, then I think that you should be thinking very seriously. If you're in doubt, then talk to your raw feeding or even conventional vets are to a certain extent are going to be familiar with bone broth, and I don't think that most vets would be anti a bone broth. You know, they don't really know the ins and outs of it, but I think that they would go for that. So
Right.
the slightest joint issues, the slightest gut issues, or if you just want to be nice to your dog, that's a good thing to do. Any disease process that involves inflammation, which is pretty much all of them, then
Yeah.
you can think about bone broth. Okay, so this is why bone broth is so good, because you can just use it in every situation. You can
Easy as
it
well,
is totally
isn't
easy.
it? You know,
Okay,
it is easy. And it's a Nick.
don't tell anybody that, because otherwise I will be out of a job. Okay. But it is, you can just use it in absolutely every scenario. If you've got skin problems, if your skin is itchy, it's inflamed, and therefore the bone broth can be really helpful. Okay, it's those collagen derived amino acids, super important for skin health. And then you've got hydration and the electrolyte balance and what have you. So there you go. I'll shut up and allow you to ask
No,
another question.
it's so insightful, Nick, and it's just awesome because you're speaking my language. You know, I've been shouting about broth for 7-8 years now, and I finally feel like the voice is being heard because people are starting to acknowledge it. But so Nick, we often have, you know, dogs that come to us that are new to broth. And one thing that we always say is to introduce broth slowly to them, you know, as a new thing, you know, just to check for allergic reactions, not to broth, but to the protein that maybe they're giving. Would you say that would be a fair suggestion to people?
I would suggest that with practically every intervention is just go gently. Yeah, for sure.
Nice. And then with regards to, let's go back to the ice thing, because it is such a funny question that comes up. Some people say that giving their dogs ice is really bad for them. Have you heard this? And what's your feedback? What would you say about that?
I'd say I think it comes from the kind of traditional Chinese medicine idea that if you give ice to a person, there will be a chilling, a cold effect. Now, and the Chinese were very conscious of warmth and cold, and among many other things. But I think there's a big difference between taking a Italian greyhound out in sub-zero snow for 5 hours, okay, which I think will probably do them some harm, okay, and giving a size appropriate treat of 1 or 2 or 3 bone broth ice cubes. If you've got a small dog, use small ice cubes. If you've got a big dog, use big ice cubes. I think there's a big difference between those two things. It's a little bit like, here's an analogy, and I don't think I've ever used this in a podcast before. If you're sitting in front of a fire, there will be warmth coming from the fire to you. Yeah, everybody knows that. But technically, in physics, there will be a tiny radiative heat going from you, because you're above ambient temperature, to the fire. Okay, but in context, the heat is much greater. So if you put a an ice cube into, you put a smallish ice cube into a 20-kilo dog, it's like how much heat is coming from you to the fire. Yeah, it's a drop in the ocean. Okay, if you give them a size inappropriate ice cube every 10 minutes for a whole day in the middle of winter, and you've switched off your central heating, you're going to do them harm. I think it's all about context. That's a very long answer for a pretty simple question, but I think it's really important that you always got to get these things in context. Okay, so I have no problem if your dog doesn't like ice cubes, doesn't matter, don't give them. If your dog loves them, most dogs love them not because of the temperature, but because of the crunch.
Yeah, sure.
They love to crunch, and if they've got bone broth, then they crunch and they get this amazing mouth feel and the flavor of the bone broth coming through, and they'll go, yeah, that's great. Don't overuse, too much of a good thing, I think, is the bottom line.
Love it, Nick. That's a great answer. I'm afraid we are running out of time, but I just have one final question.
Yeah.
But I do think is an important one, because again, it's one thing that we do get asked quite frequently. Sometimes, as I've explained, dogs come to us, they've got serious digestive problems, and people say, what's the best way to get results from the broth for my dog? Now, from my own personal experience, I've always said, and also from helping other humans, I've always said, good time to give it is on an empty stomach, when there's nothing else in the gut. Usually the first time they wake up in the morning, give them a nice cup of broth or something, because the digestive system isn't doing any other work. It's just literally going to go down, help soothe. So would you say that's a fair answer there, Nick? For somebody who's looking for maximum results for broth?
I think that giving it on an empty stomach, yeah, I'm completely comfortable with that. But what you got to think is, why have they got the upset in the first place? Yeah, if you're feeding kibble, ultra processed kibble, and they've got a terrible gut, you can feed as much bone broth as you like, and you are not going to get the results that you would if you start looking at the fundamental, which is, let's feed real food. Okay, so again, from the last show that we did, the raw food has superpowers, even if it's lightly cooked as a fresh food option. These have superpowers, but bone broth too has superpowers. But if you combine them, you get a 10x potential benefit. So for me, really, that would be the holistic way to approach those things.
Got it. That is an awesome answer. Thank you, Nick. Okay, I'm afraid we are out of time. We've actually run over a little bit of time today, but I'm just so grateful. I'm just hugely grateful again for you jumping on with me today, and and just answering some of these really important questions, and just helping people with a healthier way of life for themselves and for their dogs. That's the most important thing, and I know that's on your heart too. So yeah, awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll definitely be tuning in for another catch up. I think we're doing these monthly at the moment, Nick. So
yeah, I would make a request to all of your Boil and Broth fans to say, let us know. Yeah, let Rachel know. I'm sure you can find her through the website. Let her know what you want us to discuss, because I think that we could talk about this stuff all day. No problem. We do not need recommendations. However, it'd be nice to talk about topics that are close to your heart. So do let Rachel know, and we can do our research in that direction.
Definitely. So this is going up on YouTube. So you just pop it in the comments, and
Cool.
let's get some input, and do some stuff that people want to hear from us, and I'll put an email out and socials and stuff. But yeah, it's been an absolute delight. Thanks ever so much, Nick, and we'll catch up next time. All right,
thanks, Rachel. Keep up the good work.
Thanks. Bye for now. Bye.